any declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interests from fellow councillors, please. Please do feel free to mention it now, but if as we go along through the agenda, if you find there is any, please raise your hand and let us know. If not, we'll proceed. So we'll go for 129/20, which is any apologies for absence to the meeting.
Apologies for absence come from the chair, Mark Robinson, and yes. I said before that Chris Harvey would be with us shortly. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll proceed then. 130/20, the minutes from the previous meeting, to approve the meetings from the previous VEM committee. There was that taken part on 25th of February. I don't know if you can upload those to the screen, David, at all, or well, people did receive documents in advance, so they should have. If everybody's okay and have a think through, if they're okay with the minutes. If not, let me know, please. I'll take silence as okay, that should be fine.
Happy to approve, Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll approve then. Thanks, Terry. Approve the minutes. We'll proceed to the next item. 131/20. Any health and safety matters? Any updates to receive, please?
I don't know. I think someone's just coming in, so I'm not sure whether that's Councillor Harvey.
Colin Burnett, Councillor. Good afternoon. It's Councillor Colin Burnett
joining.
Hi, Colin. Welcome.
Hello, Colin.
So I don't know whether I've only just come back from a 2-week break, and I know Councillor Harvey did come into the venues whilst I was away just to sort of have his routine health and safety checks. And I know he's already given a report to personnel on some of the aspects. He did also visit the market, the weekly market at the weekend, and I think he's got a couple of points to raise on that. So I'm just wondering whether we can come back to this if Chris is due in.
Yeah, thank you, David. Do you want to come back to this point a little bit later in the agenda, see if Chris wants to provide any insight into this?
Yes.
Postpone it a little bit later. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll proceed. I will come back to that later then. Please remind me, David, and we'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
So we'll proceed to 132/20, lockdown projects. It's a matter to discuss amongst the fellow councillors, please. There's some images been uploaded to the screen now. We should be able to see some of the lockdown projects.
There was a report that was circulated on some of the things that we've been working on since the original lockdown on the 23rd of March. There is a section in the report, so I have to apologise from the outset that it does refer to a photograph, which I didn't put into it, but it's the one on the left-hand side, which gives you the view of the Guildhall Tea Room's new location of the counter. So that was the one that was missing. Apart from that, I don't know whether anybody's got any comments on that particular report.
Any comments? Welcome on this point, please.
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead, Councillor Hollis.
Right, thank you for the report, David. It was very good. I can see you've not been sitting on. Oh, sorry, I put.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Hollis, we lost your sound there for a minute. Could you say that again, please?
Sorry, yeah, I pushed the wrong button again.
That's quite all right. I can hear you now.
Thank you. I was going to say, David, well done. I've looked at the presentation that you've given. It's nice to see you haven't been sitting on your hands through the lockdown. Yeah, you've done really well. It looks brilliant. Looks really good. More inviting, I think, not so cold. Well done.
That's all right. Thank you for that, Councillor Hollis. I think I have Councillor Canham, hands up, if I'm correct.
Yes, thank you. My feelings was the same. It absolutely looks fantastic. It's so much more welcoming than what it was before. And the Guildhall Tea Rooms, I think that looks fantastic. So thank you. Thank you to you and your staff.
Thanks, Brenda. Any more comments from anyone? Terry, you have your hand up as well?
Lovely, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report, David, and it's nice to see the sort of ongoing gradual improvements to the building. It's certainly changed a lot over the last few years. I wanted to make a wider point, if I can, because this is the first agenda item that we've had on the committee today, and one that we was sent a report about in advance. I made this point out that when we produce reports that are in the public section of the committee meeting, what tends to appear on the presentation on screen is just a very small section of what's in the wider reports that we all get sent. And I've been reading some sort of guidance recently about the need for councils to publish not just the agenda, but papers and reports for the public section of the meeting for the public to follow, because what we can see is often some photos and a couple of sentences, but actually there are wider reports that accompany these items. And if we want the public to be aware of what we're talking about in context, or generally aware of what we're talking about, we really need to get better at uploading these documents in full to the website. So I just wondered, please, if what is the approach of the council to publishing reports and documents in full? Because at the moment, people are only seeing the brief presentation aspects and not the wider documents. And that's not to detract from the good work that's gone on. Actually, there's a lot of work in the wider reports which is being missed because we're only seeing a small section on the screen.
Yeah, can I come back on that, please, Chair?
Yes, please do come back.
So Terry's absolutely right, and actually from a personal point of view, I would love the wider public to realise the work we've done. So he's absolutely right, but I'd just like to say, certainly from my position, we are all learning in terms of teams, and as I said, I've just come back from a 2-week break, and we have been told that we are entering into some further training with our training provider to do just that. So it will hopefully allow us to be more proficient in sharing the full documentation to not just councillors but the wider public. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, this is the limit of my expertise to try and give you a snapshot of the kind of things visually that we've done. But yeah, it will happen, Terry. I can assure you the training is imminent, so hopefully we'll be better at it next time.
Thank you, David. There is some training coming up, and hopefully they'll be use to everybody. Terry, would like to come back then?
Yeah, I totally appreciate David's point, and I think we're all learning. That's that's partly the problem. So I appreciate there's some sort of training opportunities. I think the other point as well is from a councillor perspective. Today is not too bad. We've got 6 attachments, 6 documents sent to us in advance, spread over 2 emails. So I've gone through this morning and I've saved them onto my desktop so I can follow the meeting and actually, open the relevant one up. Very tricky when you're dealing with the camera and the audio and the Teams and the different documents on the screen. I can't remember how many documents. I don't think I ever found them all, to be honest with you, because they were over a number of emails. So there's a public consideration, but then also us as councillors, you want us to make the right decisions and informed decisions, and we need to be able to put our hands on the documents. So if you can build that into when you're doing this training, if you can sort of pick up on how we can be better at collating stuff for us to access, that would be really useful. I think there's only 6 today. Hopefully I've found them all. So there's public consideration, but also us as councillors.
All right, thank you, Terry, for that. I'm struggling to see the chat room, so please let me know if there's anybody with their hands up in the meanwhile.
Sure.
Does anybody want to come back on that or comment on those? Any other councils? They have any opinions regarding Terry's points in the uploading documents for people to see? No?
If I could just say something. That's
Sure.
all right. If somebody's got a few computers, that's fine. We're sitting here with a tablet. We can't look at the documents behind this. We've either had to print them off in advance, which is, basically that's why we've got tablets, so we don't have to print them. But yeah, it is hard. You have to try and keep everything in your head or sit down there for hours and write everything down. So that's just a thought as well.
Ms. Brennan, I tend to agree with both Terry's point and yours on this. We need more clarity in the documents to be accessible to everybody. So thank you for that, Terry. Brenda, you do also have a point. I am working from a tablet as well, and I struggle to jump from documents to the screen and trying to see the different bits that we need to see to follow the meeting. So that is a bit of a juggle. So perhaps a bit more training or some finding another alternative where we can access the documents maybe in advance, or some of us can access the documents maybe in a paper version whilst it's been uploaded on screen for the people to see. I don't know. I suppose this is something that the clerk and our staff can perhaps look into, and we can work with them on that. So anyways, any more comments on this, or should we proceed to the next item, please?
Chair, can I just comment on that?
Sure.
David, are you going to separately talk about the events that have taken place under this agenda item, or are we literally moving on to the next thing?
We can pick up on some of them that were in the report if you wish, but no, I'm not planning to do that unless councillors wish me to expand on some of the events that I tackled in the report. Okay,
if I may then, just because I wasn't sure if there was another slide with the event side of stuff. I just wondered if you might be able to comment, David, on the process for how we identify event opportunities, because reading the report, what's gone on over the last few weeks is positive. Well done to the team for raising the money for charity. But I just wonder really how we as a council identify events to take place, and also how we sort of quantify benefits and costs, because we raised over £1,000, or the boys themselves, not we, raised over £1,000 themselves. They were paid for that, to do that service for 24 hours. I know because I asked you. If we were to take a sort of full cost recovery approach into that, that £1,000 wouldn't have been as great, which is fine if we've made a decision as a council to do that. Previous places I've worked at, there's been a sort of event proposal form, and what are the costs and what are the resource implications. And I just wonder if we do that as a council, so that we actually have a sort of focused delivery, and we quantify what the impact is and what we've learned, or is it just somebody has an idea and we roll with it? I mean, how do we assess things?
Can I clarify, David, please, on Terry's point?
Yeah, currently at the moment, we talked about the terms of reference at the last meeting. There is a limit of budgetary amounts that I am delegated to spend on proposed events and things like that. But currently, as we stand, Terry, unless they are town-wide events, which probably mean that there is a bigger budget expenditure attached to it. So there's usually four town events. The internal venue events are pretty much up to the VEM team to brainstorm, develop and deliver within that remit. Having said that, I mean, we're always keen for more creative ideas, and councillors should certainly be part of that process. So I'm quite happy to go down the route of, because we are going to be developing things more, on more occasions going forward, certainly because we need to recover some of the costs when we reopen. So event proposal processes I'm quite happy with, because it engages everybody. Nobody's got, the license of all the creative ideas. So I'm quite happy to go with that, but that's something that we're going to have to put and propose to the committee and then adopt as a proper procedure. But we're quite happy to do that. We have regular meetings. We've learned through this process that we can float ideas differently leading up to meetings. So yeah, certainly I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terry, do you want to come back, or should I proceed as Councillor Roll is waiting?
No, that's fine. David covered my question. Thank you.
Welcome, Chris Harvey. I know Councillor Harvey just joined in recently. Councillor Roll, would you like to speak up then?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure if David can correct me if I'm wrong, but a while back on the VEM committee, we did say that during the lockdown, before, when it first happened, that we would try and promote the Carnegie Guildhall as much as we could by doing these small events. But yeah, well done to the boys though for coming up with it, a worthwhile charity. I think if we start nitpicking small things like this, then we're going to be walking into deep waters. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hollis. I just say that I've seen the work that they've done and the money there is for charity, so that's commendable, and I thank the staff members, young lads that have done it. Terry does have a point. There are some things that in regards to cost effectiveness, if you can say that, the matter of the cost versus the earnings or the profit, whether it's towards charity or towards the council itself, is something that we could perhaps take a deeper look into and perhaps work with David and Tina on that. So
can I come back on that, Chairman, please?
Yes, Councillor Hollis, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree to the extent, but if you've got a lockdown where the lads have worked really hard and we can see what the VEM team's done, for raising the amount of which is good of just over £1,000, it's going to be like we're not going to raise small amounts of money for different charities while we're on a lockdown, because it's now got to be cost effective. The lads are doing it out the good, out the good. Yes, they get paid, and that is what they're paid for, is to keep the Carnegie and the Guildhall alive, and that is what they're doing. And I think once you start means testing, that is it, and that is what's being discussed here, means testing, raising money for charities. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hollis. I appreciate your comment. Terry, you next hands up. Would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I just think it's unfortunate there's a lack of consistency in Councillor Hollis's approach, because at the end of the day, we are a publicly run and a publicly funded organisation, and the public challenge us on costs and benefits. We need to be able to provide an answer. Yes, we are raising money for charity, and that's a very good thing. I said, but actually all I'm asking for is a process for identifying event opportunities and also quantifying the benefit. It's not nitpicking. If you were to consider the staff costs for this, it'd be well over half of what was raised in total. So you're talking over £500 of public money on salaries, which, if I had been asked as a councillor if that was okay, I would have said yes. That's not the point. It's about identifying the benefits and also communicating them to people through the committee. We are the VEM committee, and the clue's in the title. We cover events. And so I think it's important that we are involved to some extent, not as a hindrance, but as an oversight, because ultimately we are supposed to be the councillors responsible for VEM.
Can I come back on that then, Chair, please? Just one. I've just got one comment. I think Councillor Jeremy's right on saying it's public money. I think some councillors need to know or remember that it's public money that's being spent.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hollis. I tend to agree with the both of you. That is public money, and we, as the VEM committee, which is it's got events on the title, we ought to oversee that and justify when we're asked how we best invest the money and the time of our staff, how we justify that to the public. We are, like Terry said it quite well, we're accountable to the public. So I fully agree on that. We should have the oversight to be able to justify any finances and any expenditure. But I also agree that they've done quite well, and the fact they raise money for charity, I'm all forced to that, and I thank them for their efforts. Any fundraising is better than none in my books. So I agree with Terry on that, and thanks, Councillor Hollis, for making the point that keep the finances in check. So it's good. Any more comments on this, please? For many other councillors have been quiet to do it. Does anybody want to come in and make a comment, or should we proceed? No, everything's quiet, I believe, or yes, I think everybody's gone quiet, so we should probably proceed.
So, Chair, as we have Councillor Harvey with us, should we go back to 131/20?
Yeah, health and safety matters, which was postponed until Councillor Harvey joined us. Hello, Councillor Harvey. Would you like to provide us with a short update, or do you have any points regarding health and safety for today, please?
Yeah, just the one. I was interested in Dave's comments about the cabling and the lack of electric hookups. I sent some pictures in of the cabling round the side of the Guildhall off to the fish stall. To have electric cabling held up with an S-hook isn't great. And even worse, to my mind, to have cable coming round the corner on the edge of a wall from that box isn't great. I think we really have to look at a way of finding a more modern, up-to-date approach of electric hookups for the market. It's got to be going forward. I mean, that can't continue in that vein. Would you agree, Dave?
Yes.
Yes, I did see your photographs. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And I would agree. The problem that we have, as you've already highlighted, is that we only have one electric hookup, which is at the rear of the Guildhall. So even if we are putting traders in the position of where the fishmonger is currently, in between the Guildhall and the Shambles, it's still a way to go. But you can have a safe route from the hookup to a trader in that position. Where we're going, or where we're not having the opportunity to have safe hookup, is when we have traders such as the one in question that we've moved to a different position in the market square, and there is a pretty long length of space to negotiate. I mean, they've done the best they can by hooking it up high, but there is a public through route from the lower market to the upper market past the gable end of the Shambles, so we have to be very careful. We have banged on about having additional electric hookups. I mean, I've spoken to everybody that's willing to listen. I know there's lots of conversations going on at the moment with various different funders and people who may well be looking at trying to improve the town centre, and this may be one of the projects that they might be looking at, hopefully. Because for us, as a VEM team, if we had at least another 2 hookups on the Guildhall Street side of the market, it would improve our opportunities no end, not just from a safety point of view, but in a delivery point of view. So I think that is a necessity to look at some point in time. But at the moment, we're trying to make it as safe as possible. And hopefully we've improved it from, the first weeks when we moved the traders.
Okay, you have a part of trying to hang the mayor, which is never a good idea. I suppose, could I come back and ask, have we ever had any costings, or how much it would cost to put electric hookups in?
Yeah,
I've never ever seen any.
Well, if it is going to go anywhere, it's going to have to go currently through the committee of ALP, because it's and I am aware of a sort of an indicative quote that was provided, and it is the sort of Rolls-Royce version, because we're trying to keep that area heritage based in terms. So we were looking at street lamps, heritage street lamps with the electric hookup bases, rather than unsightly green electric boxes just plonked in the corner of the corner of the marketplace. So unfortunately, it was about 30 grand for 4 additional hookups, but there's a lot of work to try and get it from the main circuit board across the market square. So you're talking about digging pavement and tarmacs up, installing street lights with those hookup bases. But yeah, so it's not cheap, but that's only one quote. So if we were to be serious about it, we would obviously go out further afield. We may be able to reduce that cost.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Right, waiting to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, David, I'm aware of the discussions we've had over the years about trying to improve the facilities. And as you say, it's quite cost prohibitive to do anything on the other side of the marketplace. And yes, we've always tried to improve the look of the Guildhall rather than have boxes on the front of it. I'm just wondering, with the Shambles potential change of lease at some point, if there's any mileage of a better hookup at the back there, so you wouldn't have the trailing wire, you could run it along the ground by the barrier, by the mural. I don't know whether that's been thought of or whether we could get a costing for that, David. I'm not sure if the hookup goes straight through to the normal 13 amp supply, or whether it's off the board at a higher level.
it's had a higher outage than just a normal hookup. However, I know that the shambles were upgraded, so there may be opportunity to take it from there. We've never actually thought of that idea. So it does give us scope if any of those units become vacant, that we can do some of that work in tandem with refurbishing it for, prospective letting. And that would certainly get it to areas, the memorial end of the market square, which is another key area for us. A lot easier than taking it all the way around past the Legion and down past along Guildhall Street to that area. So again, there are opportunities. You pointed out a good one there that may reduce the costs.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart. David, you did mention that you got one quote and it was quite pricey to adjust that, but I'm with Councillor Harvey on this. Anything that's got to do with health and safety, which might be a liability, especially in public places, we ought to take a second look at it and make sure we improve it as best as possible and make it as safe as possible for everybody involved, whether staff or public. You mentioned there was a quote, it's quite pricey. Is it possible to get a couple of other quotes and see what's the best way forward in that, please, David?
Well, it certainly seems an appetite with the councillors to at least address further quotes. So I'll have a chat with Ros and we can invite further contractors to come in and take a look. And
yes, if we could do that, that would be brilliant. Come back to us on the next meeting or so, and we can take a look at those quotes and see if there's something that is financially viable for us. But as long as we get the safety in place, I would say safety first, regardless of the cost, and then we have to look at the cost and see which one is the most affordable. But more quotes would be welcome. Anybody else has any comments on this, please, before we move on? No, everybody's quiet. Sorry, so I have some hands up on the chat. I've struggled to see my chat. Oh, Terry's saying he agrees to getting more quotes. Thank you, Terry, for that. Duly noted. Any other comments, please? I can't see any more hands up, so we shall move to the next item on the agenda. Is that all right? Okay, go. So we should move on then to next item, please. It will be just a second. I'm struggling to update my screen. Bear with me a minute. So it would be 133/20.
Yeah.
It's the Town Council's committee restructure. Restructuring the committees is the next item on the agenda.
Okay. The reason this is on the agenda is because this piece of work was originally undertaken by personnel to look at the restructure of all the town council committees. And there's been various different groups that have met to discuss 5 different options originally. Option 4 was favoured, and that's the option that is sitting on the slide at the moment. I think it went through to full council, and full council said that although they liked the work that had been done, it needed to go back to individual committees to discuss how that impacts on them as a committee. So we are now going through that process, and I've been asked by the town clerk to put it on this agenda to discuss the implications to VEM in the context of this structure being finally approved by full council. There is also additional implications if we were to go down this route. We are going to speak about budget setting later in the agenda. And again, if we were to go down this route, then we'd have to set budgets under a new context of structure. But basically, just to sort of what it means for us is currently venues, events and marketing cover broadly those kind of aspects that are highlighted in the blue square. But if it was restructured under option 4, then venues, events and marketing as a committee would really focus on the green square, which is venues and marketing. The events, and when I talk about events, I mean town events. So it's those kind of things like Soapbox Challenge, River Day, Christmas Light Switch On, the big town-wide freebie events would be looked to try and push into beefing up civic. And civic, although that's for civic to discuss, I don't want to get in too much in that route, but Civic would be given a wider responsibility to tackle heritage as a wider brief. We talk about our rich and diverse heritage, and we need to sort of push that on. But that's for Civic to discuss. But that's where the town events would be pushed into. And similarly, we always have this anomaly that, and I'm sitting in the VEM office at the moment and hoping that it doesn't rain. Brenda was talking about clouds coming over earlier, that if it does, the water will be coming through the ceiling again, the skylights. And again, we talk about, whose committee is responsible for that. Well, the problems emanate from the roof and the degradation of the roofing felt and things. So it does sit with ALP, but the consequences are VEM's consequences in terms of the water coming through the roof. So again, we get stalled at every hurdle with these kind of conversations. So again, we would take out all of the maintenance and repairs, and also looking at the custodianship of our venues in terms of development and funding. So they would go into a new, and I've just noticed I've got a spelling mistake there, not property, it's property development and funding. So that kind of stuff would go into that thing. So basically, this committee would be left with venues and marketing, which means that we would focus more on trying to generate income. So we would be more of a commercial committee, looking at every opportunity to generate revenue opportunities that would benefit the wider town council. So we are still looking at events that happen within the venues, but more often than not, they are hired, they are ticketed, so they are revenue generating, not the town-wide events that are usually the freebie ones for the public. But we would be looking to try and expand on things like specialist markets, improved Guildhall tea room, other event and bar and catering services, and the opportunity to possibly generate some income from advertising. But also looking at the other open spaces such as King Square, Marketplace, Melford Terrace and the Common, purely to try and drive some revenue generating opportunities like events and things like that. So if we were to go down the structure of adopting option 4, that's what this committee would be. So it's just really to see whether you are happy with that and would recommend that back to full council. I know personnel have discussed it. Personnel have not really got any changes, so they are recommending the status quo. So over to you guys.
Thank you, David. I know there's Terry waiting with a hand up. Just a brief comment. From my part, regards as a share as a councillor, I've seen this document prior to the meeting with the option 4, which was the one seems to be more popular amongst my colleagues. Whilst I appreciate there are issues that need to be addressed, David, in regards, for example, when it comes to maintenance falling under 2 committees and the job never get done because it keeps shifting from one committee to the other, which delays things. And the whole point of the committee restructuring was to really ease the flow of the work of the council, which I appreciate. It also baffles me a little bit that this was all done under this particular year, under these particular circumstances. Reason being, as most of the councillors, and I appreciate them, my thanks go to them all, they have been very active in the community, and we had to adjust to virtual meetings, we had to adjust to the lockdown, new ways of working, and most people is fully involved in the community. Whilst I appreciate members of staff in the for the council have been quite hands-on, like the boys doing the event, raising money for charity. My question here to the members of staff is, why now? I think this is important to adjust and make sure that the procedures and the flow of the work functions better, and we ought to look at it. But would this be the right time to spend this amount of time producing a document, restructuring the committee, where there's so many other priorities in my point of view? And bear with me, this is just my point of view as a councillor. Others might differ, and they're welcome to pass on their opinion. I'll look forward to your opinions as well. This is a huge bit of work done at a time where there's so many other priorities that in my point of view, ought to be addressed with more immediacy than
than restructuring and produce a document and reshuffle the whole council at a time. We should be hands-on. This ought to be done at a time where things are more quiet. But this is my personal view, and I welcome views from other councillors. Now, I know Terry had his hands up. Terry, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chairman. If I start with saying the bits that I really do like, it makes absolute sense for the creation of heritage and events which combine basically civic and the events that we discuss under VEM, because you can't deliver a civic event one day followed by a large public event the next day. That the yearly events calendar has got to take all of that into consideration, and it's often the same team that delivers them, and ultimately it's the same aim of providing good public events that the public enjoy and promote Thetford as a great place. So I think that one's a no-brainer to me. Heritage and events, 6 meetings a year is probably sufficient, and roughly along the lines of civic, which I think the dates coincide with sort of key times in the year, if you like. The other one, which is a no-brainer, which is removing entirely from ALP anything to do with property, because what we want is really to have an officer in David, I'd suggest, that is really an expert on all of our properties, the issues, whether it be the roof, whether it be the different usage, because we want all of our properties to work well together, to complement each other, not competing with each other in terms of pension hirers and that sort of thing. And they're often the same issues in terms of you need to get them repainted. Well, who's going to have the expertise for repainting buildings in Thetford? Or, the person responsible for our property. So ALP for me is more about conservation and the environment and sort of community. Putting property together makes perfect sense. The one where I'm not so convinced on is property development and funding and venues and marketing, because one says property, one says venues. They seem to be very much the same thing to me, and there would be an issue of duplication of work. Reading the report, one seems to be more about operational issues and the other is about development and how we pay for them. And I would suggest that you can't have one without the other. You need to be aware of how things are working today, but then also think about how you need the buildings to change and improve in the future to develop. So personally, I would support events coming out, going with heritage, us taking on, or them taking on anything to do with property from ALP, but to keep 12 meetings a year of the VEM committee, but have very specialised on buildings and operational and finance. Because the other thing is, I don't think 6 meetings a year is sufficient, because it is a big committee, and I think monthly meetings with those things combined would be the best way to go about it, I think.
Well, thank you, Terry. I have Councillor Canham wanted to come in now. Brenda, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. I know we've only got option 4 here, and on the ALP committee, they've got all the options. But in brief, you asked the question, why now? This has been going on a long time. And some people join a committee because their aims are one thing only. So it might have been that you was worried, you like to get involved in events. So that's why you join that, and you have to sit through everything else. And it's the same on ALP. You might be more worried about the buildings in itself and not about the open spaces. So this is why this has come about. So actually we are looking at ways where members can actually join a committee to what interests them the most. There was one, it's not on this one, and I can't remember the option, and it's where Civic actually joined VEM. So it was like a joint committee. Have you seen that one, Dave?
Yeah, that was one of the 5 options, but the reason I don't know what the other committees did or ALP did, but as far as I'm aware, and this is the reason why option 4 is one of the slides, is because that was the option that was agreed to take forward from the 5 options. But yes, okay. Civic was almost like would be just become an agenda item to VEM. But VEM is a big committee. ALP is a huge committee. So it's trying to streamline that.
Oh no, this was its own committee. It was civic and what you said earlier, it was its own committee.
Yeah. Well, basically, Civic would have the wider brief of trying to tackle our heritage offer and try to improve our offer as a town council and a wider community. So it would be heritage and events. I don't know whether any other councillors have got any other comments before I come back.
I have Councillor Wright waiting.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on Terry's point, I'm totally with the idea of civic and heritage being amalgamated and taken forward and hopefully grown. The property aspect, I do think there is a little bit overlap. One of the, I don't want to get too pedantic in small matters because I think we're looking at a bigger picture here, but you do need, if you're operating a venue, you'll know what needs to be done, and that would feed into the property development funding. So if, you know, David and I've worked over with Carnegie for many years, or we used to all have a door there. So you want to get some funding to put a door in there to make the venues run smoother, get better opportunities. And so I do see an overlap with the property development and running the venues themselves. I think keeping the properties in one area is great. And like Terry said, at the 6 meetings a year, I think we can and kept it with 12 because things happen on a month-to-month basis that I think the committee would like to be kept informed with and feed into the process of. I think, you know, yes, that's right. Keep the playgrounds and the amenities and all that separate and keep property away from out. But I do think there is some mileage in looking at the properties and venues as one holistic offer. And if we do split them so that you've got venues separate from property, I do think the venues do need a little bit of a repair budget to, you know, up to a certain amount of money just to facilitate things. The last thing we want to do is have to go to another committee to get some funding to, you know, get a door handle fixed. So I do think, you know, ideally we keep them together, but if they are split, I do think venues need to have a little bit of their own budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. So we have so far a few comments. We have comments regarding the number of meetings, which are not sufficient. They, you know, according to Terry and a few others, that we require more meetings to make sure the flow of the work runs smoothly. We have some issues with the overlapping of the properties with the events going on inside of them on the option 4, which might need to take a second look at before we come up with a final plan. There's some agreement that ALP properties stay separate from amenities because they are quite distinct. And if I'm not wrong, lastly, we have some points regarding the venues need some repairs, and how we go about dividing the funds raised in the finance to support those repairs as well. Do correct me if I'm wrong or if I forgot any other points. I don't know, Chris, if you want to make a point of this, or David, you want to make a point, a note of those points to take forward so we can amend these options, please.
Yeah, so what I would ask is, we're in agreement in terms of the general option 4, with the caveat of some of these recommendations. So we don't like the idea of bi-monthly meetings. Currently, we have 10 meetings. We don't sit in August or December, so 10 meetings a year, and I think the other one is a budgetary point in terms of small repairs and maintenance. So I think that's okay. Can I just make a point in terms of Terry and Stuart's response? The property, you know, the titles of these committees, you know, they can be changed. It's the responsibilities around it. And I think in terms of property and development, the Guildhall is a very good example. I mean, officers, we work together daily. This is not to lessen the load of the officers. It's actually, you know, we work together all the time. We work across committees all of the time. So we would have been looking at the Guildhall a few years ago and saying, what are the weaknesses and strengths of the Guildhall? Well, access was always one that came up. So we needed to get that disabled ramp in there. how did we do it, things like that. Now, the implications for me as an operational manager of the venues, I would be talking to Ros, if she was the clerk to property and development, about how I want or what I need to further the aims and results of the venues. So it's the venues and property are two different beasts. You know, when we talk about venues and marketing, it's about the operational part of the venues, not actually managing the maintenance and repairs of the overall scheme. And also the other thing to think about is property development and funding. So again, how do we get these things that we want? How are these things going to materialise that I can benefit as a venues manager? Well, we need funding, and Ross has been particularly successful in recent years in getting funding, not just for the Guildhall, but St Peter's. But you need to be able to focus your time on that. So again, committees can feed across to other committees in terms of what they want. But the property development one is just taking the responsibility of being the custodian of those buildings so they don't fall into disrepair. So that was the view of that one. But yeah, we can take on all of those points and recommend it through to full council, because I think that's where it goes to next.
All right, thank you, David. Can I just make a point that if you said, you are correct, you as members of staff in the clerk, you guys work across all the committees. You quite often are the secretary for most of the committees. Whilst as full council, we all sit together. The committees for us as a council, we're part of some and not others. So not all councillors are in all committees all the time. But you as members of staff know and get the insight from all those meetings together. So if there's something that pops up, and my question is, if there's issues like, for example, the water leaks that you just mentioned that need to be repaired, that they keep being shifted from committee to committee, this is something that if you're being aware, should be addressed or presented, put on the agenda for the proper committee. But I'm happy that this has been restructured to hopefully a more effective way of working from now onwards, and I accept any more comments regarding this. I think I have Terry with hands up, if I'm not wrong. Terry?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you for the response, David. Just two further points. I think we all recognise that we are a relatively small team of staff at the Town Council, so I think it's inevitable that everybody works together and crosses different committees and different work streams, and that's inevitable. I think there needs to be a consideration that councillors need to be able to choose committees that best suit their skills, because we're not all experts on anything or everything rather. So I think it's really important that we're clear on what the roles are of the different committees when we choose which ones to go on. So I think that's important. And then also, I think there's a difference between venues and property, which is public facing, St Peter's to an extent, Guildhall, Carnegie, and those properties which are really assets that we rent. Really, that's more of a finance committee role, where their sole purpose to us is to provide us with income to support our other activities. What really VEM is concerned about is the venues that we use to provide activities, events and services, not so much those that are just buildings that we get rent for each month and they support all the other activities. So I think that might need to be considered as well.
Hi, Terry. Am I right to say that looking at this option 4, finance contracts and leases are in one of the squares as a single committee? So I see your point regarding putting any income raising through contracts and leases in one section separate from the other events and venues. And I believe under option 4, this is the last square, which finance includes leases as part of just an income stream, which might be more suitable. In that case, so I agree with you, Terry. I think I had David, Stewart, Councillor Wright, wanting to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, following on from Terry's point, I totally agree. The renewal of leases and that sits within finance as a function, and as you've mentioned it, that's what's proposed, so that's fine. I accept some of David's points, but what I would say, we're in a better position now, David, working with Ros than we have been for a number of years in terms of getting funding and getting this thing. So I accept that there is cross-committee working. It's more, I think, like Terry said, the councillors. If you get a councillor sitting on one committee, they may not be aware of what's going on the other. All right, we do get all the minutes and all that, and we should do, but I know full well that a number of councillors sit on one committee, but they don't actually appreciate what's going on in others. So going back to this property and the venues, keeping that together, I think would have merit rather than splitting them. Thank you.
I think that's a valid point, Councillor Wright. I agree. I've raised the same point as well. Any other comments from any other members? There's people some quiet in the background. Councillor Harvey, Councillor Hollis, Councillor Burnett. I don't know if you're still with us.
I'm still with you.
Oh, lovely, Colin. Nice to hear from you. Anybody else wants to make a comment, or should we leave it with the staff to try to make some amendments and some recommendations to this proposal and move on to the next item of the agenda? Yes, I'll take that as a yes. Sorry, there's something.
So, Chair, could I just say that what we'll do then is, because this needs to go to full council, so before we go too far down the line, if I can just try and make some sense of those recommendations and circulate them to all the councillors before we go to the next stage.
David, can I have Terry as his hand up? Should he come in first before we summarize it all in the recommendations then?
Absolutely, yeah.
A rounded view of everything?
No, that was my very point, Chairman, as to what were the next steps, and does David have enough from us to take it forward is really what I was going to check. But David's indicated that he's got enough to take it forward, so that's covered.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I think there is quite a few points of view regarding this and quite a few recommendations. Right, David, would you like to summarize them then for us, or if
we've spoken a lot. I might have to listen to the tape a few times, but I think I'll get there, and then I'll circulate it to all the VEM councillors.
Yes, please. If you can put it all in one summarized version, then we can all take a look, and hopefully other councillors will read through and see if there's anything else that comes up before a final approval.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Chair, it's Chris Crimmen here.
Hi.
Is this going to be a recommendation going forward on the, once David's done his work and taken feedback from all?
Okay. Yes, it's a recommendation in the opinion of the members of the VEM committee regarding this, I would imagine, to full committee.
This does need to be a recommendation around the amendments that we've discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can let me have that, David, and that will I'll incorporate that into the minutes.
Yeah, once I've run it past the councillors, we're all happy with it, then yes, that will happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, David and Chris. We shall proceed then. If there's nobody else wanting to make a comment, we proceed to the next item of the agenda then. I'll take that as a yes. So the next item, we move on. Just a second, I'm trying to upload my screen. My apologies, this is a bit slow. If I'm correct, is item 134/20. The next one, marketing and communications.
Yes.
Is also, that's right. Is to also to receive an update from any from the staff and any councillors regarding marketing and communications. I'll open the conversation to you, fellow councillors. Anybody wants to come in this? Anybody has any updates to provide? No? Everybody's gone quiet. David, as from the members of the staff, any updates, any mentions under this item, please?
No, the report came from Tom. I think he's covered all aspects very well. So the report was circulated before, so unless there's any other comments, I'm happy with that.
I see some notes on the chat room, so everybody seems to be happy to proceed with this. So we'll move on to 135/20, which is the VEM budget, venues, events and marketing budget. There's two parts to this item. The first is to receive an update and discuss the COVID-19 implications. And the second part is the VEM budget for 2021/2022, setting schedule of budget. So we'll take the first one then, to receive an update and discuss COVID-19 implications. Would you like to proceed, David, if there's any updates, please?
Okay, so we circulated the end of the first quarter period of the VEM budget. Lockdown commenced on March the 23rd, when all the venues were closed, all the events were cancelled for the foreseeable future, and we currently are still within those lockdown restrictions. So as you can see from the budget, the consequences of that were devastating, really. I mean, usually, if you're looking at quarter approaches, the first quarter of our financial year is always a good one. The second quarter traditionally is pretty poor, which has always been a bit of a disappointment in terms of it's our main summer. But people then go away on holidays and things. So our second quarter, if this goes into the second quarter, the impact is going to be less on our overall budget. But clearly, if we go into third and fourth quarter, then it's going to be catastrophic, because third and fourth quarter is where we usually make up any shortfalls. As you can remember, last year, even though we were doing quite well on bar income, for instance, our fourth quarter would have, and in fact, our final 2 weeks would have added another £3,000 to projected to that final total. So the third and fourth quarter are absolutely critical to us to try and make any recovery at all. Sorry.
No, yeah, thanks, David. So for clarification, for anybody watching the meeting, is that when it comes to the income on those sites, on those venues, is that our high seasons, what is considered high seasons and low seasons, and usually on an average, ones compensate the others. But given the lockdown and COVID-19 implications, all that venue was sort of stroke off, and we're struggling to, if I read you well, David, is that we're struggling to compensate those income. That income from other sources, which is something we need to look on. But do proceed, David. Thank you.
Yeah, if we go into the same status into the third quarter, then it is going to be devastating. And on a positive note, restrictions are being relaxed slowly. We are in communication with our regular hirers all the time. And hopefully by in fact, we are looking at one or two of the lower impact activities already looking to restart. September possibly is going to be the first month where we can reopen to other activities such as meetings and things like that. The wider celebratory events, the parties, etc., there is nothing on the foreseeable horizon in terms of any changes in lockdown restrictions, which is a shame, because one of the positive things was when lockdown restrictions were implemented, rather than not have the kind of conversation that we have been having with those hirers, many of them just rescheduled the dates to further in the year, hoping things would change and recover fairly quickly. A lot of those dates are in the period between September and December, so some of it is looking unlikely at this moment in time, even though we do have a healthy hire diary for January onwards. So fingers crossed we might be able to make some recovery, and the projected income column shows that kind of hope, but certainly there's going to be a huge impact to our budget over the course of the year.
Well, fingers crossed that things will look up and we can basically proceed as expected, as budgeted. I think I have Terry wanting to speak now.
Yeah, thank you, David. It's a similar story sort of all over. I think it's sort of every council I'm on and every organisation I'm involved in, it's fairly bleak when it comes to finances. One thing I think we do have a bit of an opportunity, sort of every cloud has a silver lining and all that. We have a lovely big hall in the Carnegie, and even the large core is quite big. Are we going to do any specific sort of marketing to say to people, if you're having to put on an event and incorporate social distancing, lots of people are not able to fit into the spaces that they were previously in because they're just not big enough to cope for numbers. But we've got a great opportunity because we've got a lovely big space to accommodate. So I think some sort of tailored marketing around that would be definitely a good idea. And just a wider point while I'm talking about budgets. We spoke earlier in the year, I think it was, on budget items. It's not a sort of true reflection of costs because obviously we don't show personnel staff costs because they go to the personnel committee. And I thought we agreed that we would include a line somewhere just to indicate what the actual full costs were doesn't include business rates, I don't think, doesn't include staff costs. So we're looking at a sort of plus or minus figure out at the bottom, which is not really a true representation of the cost. So I'm hoping we might be able to pick that up moving forward.
I think, Terry, do you want to come back, David, or?
Yeah, we did discuss that, Terry, and I have had wider discussions here in the office. I mean, Alan has been doing an awful lot of work to try and centralise the accounts and format them, and actually that is still going to sit within personnel. Although I'm hoping that we can, going forward, get some just kind of indicative costs against what those salaries are. But it won't sit as a budget line in VEM budget because it sits within personnel. But I agree, we need to do that.
Thank you, David. Anybody else wants to make any comments on this point? I mean, we already overlapped through the second part of this item, which is the budget for 21-22. David made some points regarding what is expected in order to recover some of the income coming January onwards. So any points on any of those two sub items of this agenda item, please, from any other councillors? Anybody? Everybody's quiet. I guess not. I suppose to proceed, David. I think everybody's.
Sorry. Just to respond to the other part of Terry's question is, yes, we are seeing some of our hirers. We had a conversation today with the Portuguese consulate, actually, who feel that they need to come. They usually are housed in one of the Guildhall rooms, which is clearly out of action at the moment because of the refurbishment works. But Terry's right. We feel that we can safely allow those to meet in the Carnegie with a more safer in and out system and plenty of space for them to interview their attendees. Clearly, we're going to have to be very creative and accepting that we're not going to be able to charge Carnegie prices when they usually have the Guildhall Council Chamber. But we can do that because, something is better than nothing, to be honest.
I agree, David, and Terry makes an excellent point. Is using the space we have to our advantage given the limitations, and it's not only about how much income. Some income is better than none. I agree, David, but it's also about creating facilities for people to carry on with their business and make sure that the opportunities that are open to different groups and institutions to use the space. And if we have the space to accommodate them in a safe manner, I'm fully forwards to it, fully in favour. Any other opinions? Any other councillors want to come in on this point before we proceed?
Oh, thank you.
Anybody there? No? Sorry. I thought I heard someone talking now. That's quite all right. If everybody's happy with that, David, we can proceed to the next one. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. We'll move on then.
Okay, so budget scheduling. This is the scheduling sequence initiated by the Finance Committee, and this is the process that we need to go through. So point one, which we've already covered in the earlier agenda item, to determine whether we need an alternative budget for any new committee proposals. So initially we would be looking to put forward a budget plan A for the current status and B for any new committee structure going forward. For us, it's not a big deal, to be honest. If we're just moving events out into civic, it's literally taking a sum of money that we allocate to the townwide events from our overall budget. So it's not a big deal for us, as it might be for other committees. The second section was a formal revision of fees and tariffs. So unless councillors have got any specific views on looking at those higher fees or market tolls, again, we've already covered those within our normal process of committee meetings, and we decided not to increase those going forward. And it's even more of an issue at the moment, trying to attract people back to the venues. And then in September, when we do meet again for VEM in September, we need to then agree our main priorities for not just next year, but the next 3 years. So Are there things like maintenance, repairs and things like that that we need to look at and factor in, and get our first draft of the VEM budget by September. It then goes to finance and usually gets thrown back to committees to look at revisions in October, and the final budget will be approved in November, ready to go to full council and be adopted. So that's the schedule. I don't know whether everybody is happy with that or have got any comments.
Yes, any comments, please? No? I think, David, everybody's gone quiet.
So point 2 on their revision of fees and tariffs, is everybody happy with the earlier decision that VEM made in terms of remaining with current status?
I think Terry has his hands up, David, so if he wants to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I seem to be talking a lot today, but in the absence of anyone else contributing, I'm happy to put my point of view across. David, the revision of fees and tariffs, just so I'm clear, even though we'd be looking at those in August, obviously the budget discussion is the budget for the new financial year. Would the fees and tariffs be for the new financial year, or would they be from August onwards? I'm just not sure of the sort of crossover in the process.
Traditionally, we've looked at fees and tariffs around about the October, November of each year for the following budget, which always seems a bit strange to me, because it's a little bit too late in the day. So I think we need to probably pull that back into the scheduling process in the future. So we did make that decision last November, I think, in terms of what we would look to for this particular year budget. So if we were to pull it forward and try and make a bit more sense in terms of our budgeting process, and the fact that we don't have a meeting in August, so it might mean that I need to do some work ready for September. Is there any appetite to revise those fees going forward? And I know that's one that's been thrown into the mix.
Okay, just so bearing that in mind, but what the chairman said earlier, I think is a really valid point, that some income at the moment is better than no income, and plus there's the wider issue about the council as a whole doing what it can to support the local economy, which I'm really passionate about. You know, we've all got to do what we can, basically. I would be really keen for us to consider sort of amending the sort of concessions policy to incentivise usage of our buildings rather than them being sat empty, whether that be discounts or you know, other arrangements. I don't know if you, when you bring that schedule of fees back, you want to sort of maybe think about how we can achieve that, and whether there's an appetite for doing sort of, you know, one-off free sessions or something out there. I mean, it's hard to know without knowing what the individual hirer's circumstances are, but I think it's an opportunity for us to do something over the next 12 months to get as much use from our buildings as possible. We're going to be paying certain bills no matter what, so we might as well get as much use as we can to support groups, organisations in the town.
I agree. Thank you for that, Terry. I agree with that. And so we're not sure what's going to happen and how much of the lockdown is going to be lifted, if it's going to be lifted completely, or if we're just going to come back to some restrictions later on in the year, into the new year. So I for one, have the view that any income, while we can make some, is better than none, and same time help the economy, like you said. Not knowing how it's going to be in the future, you know, the income is going to be uncertain. So maximizing it while we can is always a good way forward. David, any more points, please?
No, I'm happy to put together a few ideas for consideration of the committee going forward. So there's a couple of ideas I've got around market tolls, talking to other local councils and local markets. So yeah, I can bring that to the table next time round.
Yes, please do. Thank you for that. Anybody else wanted to come in? I think I have somebody else. Oh, no, I think that's it. Councillor Hollis, maybe? Would you like to come in? I'm just trying to look at my phone, trying to figure out who's next in line. Sorry.
No, I've got happy listening. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it.
There's nobody. Come back to you on that one. I will come back to you on that one about doing the maybe lowering prices to get people in, as you say, something's better than nothing for our things, but they will be effectively costed, won't they, on staff's time if it's viable, won't it, David? Please.
Yes, they will, Jenny. And also, to be honest, if restrictions are lifted at certain points in the year, certainly that final third and fourth quarter, we do currently have a healthy diary anyway. So fingers crossed we can make some recovery. But clearly, again, with the ongoing work at the Guildhall, we do have to try and incentivise people to return. So, yeah, we can do that piece of work fairly quickly.
It makes sense. Thanks, Councillor Rollins and David. Anybody else wanting to come in now? Any other comments? Some people, it's quiet for a little while. Does anybody want to make a comment, or are we happy to proceed with that? No, I think everybody's gone quiet, David. Any more points, please?
No, fine with me.
Okay, should we move on then? Yeah? Okay, we'll move on then if there's no more comments. And the next item on the agenda will be 136/20, I believe, is the committee officers update. To receive any update from the committee officers since the issue of the agenda.
Okay, on returning from a 2-week break, yeah, I'm pleased to inform you that the Guildhall works has come on leaps and bounds. It's certainly within time frames, so hopefully you know, it will meet that mid-August deadline in terms of the internal works. The other good positive news is that the contingency that we had for additional works was £9,000 in the overall sum. They have done a lot of the exploratory works, and there is no real concerns that they have to spend any additional money. And as I've said, they've taken out the dumb waiter now. They've actually got pretty much the footprint studied out and walls up and plastered. So they're going on to the next phases of fit out. So what my request is that the £9,000 contingency has been already approved within the overall sum, and I would just like to request a couple of other areas and ask just for your approval in terms of where we can probably look to try and spend some of that money. One area, and I know Councillor Wright will understand this more than perhaps some of the other councillors, simply because of his connection with Dad's Army. All the electrics in the Guildhall are based on the circuit board in the basement. And what we are looking to do going forward is obviously to use the Guildhall for a much wider variety of activities and events. Small parties and things like that, for instance, wedding receptions on a smaller scale, because people have got tighter budgets. And if you have that kind of activity going on, I remember a few years ago, we had a fantastic one-woman show in the small court of the Guildhall about homes and cable. And it was an absolute mission to try and turn lights on and off, because it was almost like a relay between staff to say, yes, you can turn the light off now. Next one, it was like Chinese whispers. And so what we've discussed with the contractors is that they would move all the electrics pertinent to the ground floor rooms, small court, large court, council chamber and corridor, into an upper section on the ground floor. And that's going to cost a little over £1,000 to do that. But I strongly recommend that we do that, even from a safety perspective, because the stairway down to the Guildhall basement is not the best at any time. And the other area is there's an awful lot of work being done in the corridor area. And it was last decorated 7 years ago. And I know that because when I joined the council, that was the very first thing that was going on when I was here week 1. And although we've had 2 quotes, we're happy to get another one. And the lowest quote for that area is at £5,000. So together it's £6,000 of that £9,000 contingency that we would just be looking for the committee to approve the spend in that area, as it's already approved and agreed the overall sum. So I just need if the committee wishes to go down that route, just approval on spending that contingency in these areas.
Hi, David. I take your point that you want to, make a couple of proposals for a little bit extra expenditure under the 9,000 plus pounds that are already been approved as contingency. I have Stuart White wanting to come in. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, to just back up David's concern over the lighting, that's been a bugbear for many years, and for £1,000 to get that facilitated, that will be fantastic, and make the rooms a lot more usable as well, because, as David said, if you want to do a lighting there, it does cause an extra manpower to go up and down the stairs, and the stairs are not the easiest things to negotiate. And with the new ramp being in there, it won't be ideal to jump down off the ramp to get to the stairway. So for £1,000 to get the electrics moved up, I think is a great thing. I presume the cost of the hallway is such, because it's working at height, is a lot of the cost of getting that done. But obviously, going through a 3 quotes process, you get best value for money for doing that. But it would be a pity to spoil the ship for havens of tar if we're refurbishing everywhere else, and then we've got a grotty hallway to come into. So I think if we can facilitate that via the 3rd quote, that would be great. Thank you.
So some clear support from Councillor Wright there, which has insight to the matter, as David mentioned, which is great. I have on my chat line, I think I have Councillor Crawford in support as well. Yep. Now, there's quite a few councillors in support. David, would this need to be put forward as a formal proposal for to be accepted, or can we proceed to make a decision on it and then pass it on? How would you suggest we go about this? Chris, do you want to
the original sum of money, the £9,000 contingency, was already approved in the overall sum. What we're asking councillors to do is to revise the allocation of spend of that contingency. So we certainly can't go over the 9,000. There actually is no reason to, because our lowest quote so far on the decoration is 5, and the electrics we know are 1,000. So we're only roughly 6 or just over £6,000. So as long as we don't go over that, hopefully we can come under if we can get a slightly cheaper 3rd quote.
I have Councillor Harvey in support as well in the chat, and I have Councillor Jeremy wanting to come back with his hands up, if I'm correct.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm boringly consistent on these matters. This is not an agenda item, so I'm not sure if we can make a decision in any case. This is any other business type mop-up. And it's a shame, really, that we all rush so quickly to spend £9,000 without seeing any written report, any evidence of need or justification for it. The £9,000 was agreed for a previous project. I'm personally happy for that to be ring fenced for use in that area, but it's the way in which we make decisions and the way in which we are seen to make decisions that really troubles me. If it's that important, it needs to be done well, and we need to evidence it. It's not a matter of delaying it, because we should be able to do all of that relatively quickly, but I don't think we can at this point make that decision in this meeting, and I wouldn't want to anyway without having all of the information before us.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jeremy. I am in agreement. From what David said, the 9,000 plus pounds had already been approved, so I'm not contesting that part. But if this is how we're going to go forward, and there seems to be a lot of support from Stuart, from Councillor Wright, Harvey, Crawford, and so on, for this money to be approved for this section of the works, which I agree as well. If it needs to be done, it ought to be done. We can put this as an agenda item, discuss and pass it on to full approval, in full council, which kind of will encompass all the councillors together making the approval. So for a bit more clarity, so everybody's on board. So I agree with Terry on this one. I'm just see, I have somebody else with their hands up. I'm trying to see who. Oh, Councillor Hollis is in support as well.
Can I just say a word? It's Chris Crimmen here. Yes. I agree with what Terry says. There isn't an agenda item to cover this. You could put a postscript on or something that perhaps this could go up to full committee, which is in a week's time, and get it agreed then. But I don't think you can do anything on this meeting.
No, I agree with both you and Terry as well. So we perhaps put this as an agenda item to go for a final approval with the full committee, with the full council. I have Councillor Canham says that she supports in principle to go forward on the chat room. I have Councillor Wright asking for an agenda item on full council as well. So it seems to be a general consensus. Anybody else wanting to come in and comment on this, please? That I have maybe other comments that I haven't seen. Did I miss anybody there, or is everybody happy with this to be put in as an agenda item to be approved later on? No? Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with everybody. Anybody else? If anybody wants to come in, please come now. I'm trying to keep up with my order of hands up really at the moment. So we have Terry saying agenda item of full council with the report for clarification, transparency on where the money is being spent and what's been done with it. Fully. Thank you for that, Terry. Anybody else? If not, we'll proceed. David, any other comments on this? We proceed to the next item.
No comments on this one. No.
Okay, thank you. So we'll proceed to the next item on the agenda. That's item number 137/20. That's community engagement. So to discuss and agree any consultation or media release required. I'll pass it on to you, David. If there's any other points or any other councillors that want to make a point on this item, please.
From me, there's no other comments apart from the fact that, you know, as restrictions are being relaxed a little bit, we can now take more positive, as Councillor Jeremy said earlier, in marketing the Carnegie and the Carnegie certainly going forward. So we will start doing that.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Any other comments? Any of the other councillors have been quiet in the background? Anybody wants to make a mention before? I believe this is the last item on our agenda for today. So any other points or any other comments before we proceed and close the meeting, please? Anybody? Everybody's happy with that then, I would assume? Yes. Okay, in that case, if there's no more points, we'll consider this finished for today. And I thank everybody for your participation, from the staff to all the fellow councillors. Thank you for attending the meeting.